I'm delighted to welcome today Elena Perella from Sardinia. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Elaine. It's a pleasure to be here.
Most welcome. I just love your accent. I think I should just let the recording go and you can just talk and send us all to sleep.
Oh, no, please don't do that. Although, no.
So, okay, so tell our listeners why you are keen to spread your story and explain to people how they can help themselves as you've done.
Yes. First of all, I'd like to say that I am a personal coach and I help people identify and eliminate their family's toxic emotional inheritance. And this is a toxic baggage of emotions, thoughts, beliefs, tendencies, unresolved childhood issues, inner conflicts that was passed on to us by our parents and previous generations. And this toxic inheritance affects the natural development of our potential, compromising our psychological functioning, emotional functioning, and physical functioning.
It's amazing how all the science and the medical stuff is all kind of starting to fuse together now, because we never heard until recent years about how the mind and the body are connected, and now we're learning so much about it that has been around for millennia, for ancient times, but has been suppressed from us. And so when they're kind of suddenly discovering all this new stuff that's not new at all, is it? It's ancient.
Yes, it is not new. It's something that it was already there, but for some reason we didn't pay much attention to it, and we lost track.
Yeah. So tell us, Elena, about your story. So what led you to do what you currently do? Let's go back. So what things have happened to you that have inspired you to become a coach in the way that you coach?
I must say that behavior is a passion of mine since I was a child. In the beginning, when I was very little, I was passionate about animal behavior. And then during the teenage years, I got a little bit lost. And it was then when I began to develop unhealthy behaviors and to go through destructive experiences. And they said that it was my fault, my choice, because during those years, I developed a binge eating disorder. I began to smoke. I was bullied at school. And they say that it was my choice, my fault. But was I really so stupid to choose to hurt myself? I don't think so. Nobody's so stupid to choose to hurt himself, right? And when I was 19, I opened my eyes. I awoke. And then I saw that I was a toxic product of my family, that all those problems and the problems that I would face later were a manifestation of what I inherited from my parents, that the toxic part, let's call it that way. Yeah.
Interesting. And we hear so often about people who've had eating disorders and self-harming and all kinds of things, and they all seem to stem from an unhappy childhood, and then these experiences manifest in these kind of self-harming tendencies. So how did you? So you woke up. What was it that made you wake up, and what did you do when you woke up?
It was a tragic event, the death of my father, and it was when he died. It was as if a veil dropped from my eyes, and I began to see things for what they really are. As I told you, I saw that I was a toxic product of my family. I began to see toxic dynamics in the family, in my family. I began to see the real intentions behind people's behaviors. So it was as if the light was suddenly on in a dark room, what was before a dark room. Yeah, and it was then that I began to go through a process of awareness. I chose, then I could make a choice, and I chose to become aware of all toxic inherited elements that were forcing me to sabotage myself and my life. because it wasn't my choice. None of those toxic behaviors and destructive experiences was my choice. I was forced by those toxic elements.
So this was at the age of 19. So you were 19 when your father died.
Yeah.
I was 19 when my father died too.
Wow. Yeah.
I don't believe I had toxic stuff, but I do believe I'm the product of a very strong upbringing, which has stood me in good stead in many areas, and opened my eyes and others as well. So yeah, there we go. So you talk about toxic dynamics. What do you mean by that?
Well, the behavior, like for example, I saw that between my mother and I, there were toxic dynamics that she, for example, made me feel guilty for her unhappiness. No? And in that way, she could control my behavior. And sometimes it was very, very subtle. Sometimes it was quite evident, but it was toxic. No? It was a toxic dynamic that hurt a lot.
Yes. Yeah. Did you have any other? Do you have any other siblings?
I have a brother. Yeah.
And was it the same behavior tendencies towards him as well, or was it just for you?
He developed other things, and we are separated. So unfortunately, we don't have contact anymore. Yeah.
Okay. And that's your choice. You've chosen that, presumably.
It's our choice.
Oh, okay. So both of you.
Yeah, it's our choice. Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, that's very grown up. If you've come to that conclusion together that it's not a good relationship, that's extremely grown up. I'm hearing so often, and it's happened in my family as well, the separation for various different reasons, and just because we have this blood connection doesn't mean to say that we get on, and it's very difficult, and when we wake up to it, it can be hurtful. So what did you do then? So you mentioned that you awoke, kind of, you had this veil lifted at 19. So what strategies did you put in place to get you through to who you are now?
Actually, most of the process happened spontaneously. You know, it was just because I really wanted it. Then solutions began to come to me, and of course I wasn't completely. How can I say it? Because it was a process. I had to eliminate a lot before I came to the state where I am today. And I tried many things that were offered by outside sources, let's call it that way. For example, I tried for the eating disorders, I tried to control my weight, I tried to control what I ate, but nothing worked. And I knew that it was because I had to eliminate the internal cause first, the root cause. And it was indeed like I'm saying, once I eliminated the root cause, then the eating disorders faded away, because I suffered from the binge eating for 7 years when I was a young teenager. When my father died, the binge eating turned into bulimia nervosa, and I suffered from that for 16 years. So it was a quite long process. Yeah. And I read a lot. What helped me was also reading. I began to read, for example, literature. I began to read about history. I began to read about human behavior, and all those things about psychology enriched me. They didn't give me the answer, because for some reason I found those resources limited. I couldn't find the answer that I was looking for, and it was inside of me. Eventually understood that it was inside of me. Nevertheless, the readings that I did helped me to understand myself better. That's for sure. Yeah.
Excellent. That's why I do what I do with the behavioural profiling, because when we know who we are, when we understand what our innate behaviours are, we can then sort of awaken to them and not try and change who we are. You know, we can't fundamentally change who we are, but we can choose how we behave and how we deal with our behaviours. And that's a big wake-up call for some people.
But we can choose it if we awake and we become aware of those behavior, and we eliminate the root cause that force us to behave in different ways, in unhealthy ways.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
If we don't do that, we cannot choose. We really don't have a choice.
Yes.
If we manage to control unhealthy behaviors without eradicating the root cause, we become frustrated, and we have to be continuously under control and monitor ourselves to not fall into temptation. Yes. Because we haven't eradicated the root cause, you know, and so this causes a lot of stress, and the root cause will manifest another symptom, not an eating disorder, not an addiction, but it can be something related to stress. It can be something related to something different that pops up in our lives. So it's always, if we really want to eliminate bad behaviors, unhealthy behaviors permanently, we really have to do something to eliminate the root cause.
Absolutely. Something that I bang on about often, and unless we know the root cause, so I do it in a different way to you. You do it through the psychology side of things. I have a little bit of psychology with the disc behavioral profiling, which I've had developed to show a health bias. But I also do it with laboratory testing, blood testing, hair analysis. So we get to the root cause of what's actually physically going on in the body. So it's a good kind of mix between what you do and what I do and how we help people. So in your case, then, it's sounding like that the root cause was the relationship with your mother.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. Because my mother, first of all, she had a troubled relationship with food, and she passed that tendency on to me. She also didn't want to have children. So when I was in her womb, I was already absorbing all the stress, that she didn't want to have me. And so we absorbed everything from our mothers, because they are the vehicles to that, emotionally, the food, the nutrition that we need to grow and prepare ourselves to be born. And so I absorbed a lot, and hatred towards life, because she didn't enjoy her life. Unfortunately, she also grew up in a toxic environment. So she isn't an happy person.
Okay, this is so important with healing. So the work that I've done for quite some time now is helping people to reverse serious illness, particularly cancers, and the root cause is very often never found with people with cancer. It's always an emotional cause. All illnesses are caused by an emotional trigger, or a chemical trigger, or a physical trigger. But the emotional trigger is by far and away the most common. But most people don't realize it, because we, as humans, we think that we've intellectually dealt with stuff, but actually our body is holding on to the toxicity, as you've mentioned with the pregnancy and so on. So until people realize that they can have the best diet going, they can have the most wonderful lifestyle, and be outwardly happy and all the rest of it, but if they haven't got to the root cause of their situation, and they might even have forgotten it, it's happened to me several times that things have popped up and I thought, oh, that reminds me of such and such, and then I've forgotten that something has happened, and then it starts coming out. So how do you work with people, Elena? How do you help people to break this cycle, or even to be aware that there is a cycle?
Through conversations. Through conversations, I help them have total awareness, absolute awareness on themselves, their behaviors, and the root cause. And I can see in them what these inherited elements are, and I make them aware. And through the conversations, they begin to become, to wake up, to become aware, and also to eliminate those, because becoming aware is already kind of first step to cleanse yourself from the inside.
So when so Mrs. Smith comes to see you, and or presumably you do a lot of work online these days, as most people do. So you've helped Mrs. Smith, for example, to identify that there's some toxicity that's the root cause of her challenge. How then do you move the person forward?
Actually, it's the person itself that moves himself or herself forward. Yeah,
I'm glad you said that. That's what I expected. That's brilliant, brilliant. So, how do you nudge them? How do you nudge them then to realize that it's inside?
Well, for example, one of my current clients is an adolescent, and she inherited a lot from both mother and father, and I made her aware that her behavior and what she says is not hers. She inherited that from her father. And it took 1 or 2 sessions to become really, really aware. And she was a kind of resisting that. And she began to reflect on it. She began to observe her thoughts, her behavior. And then after those 2 sessions, she came to me speaking in a different way. And first of all, with a smile on her face. She didn't have that when she began, and she said, "Yeah, it does make sense. Indeed, that's not me. I recognize that in my father, and why shouldn't I try something else? How I would behave and think if I don't listen to those inherited beliefs and convictions." And that was enough.
How do you help people with the balance? Because it's one thing to awaken to what's the root cause of the challenge, but then how do you stop people going to the other extreme of blaming? Oh, well, it's not my fault, it's their fault, so that they could then, actually create a bigger problem for themselves and blame and anger, and that's resentment.
Yeah, I always say it's not about blaming. Of course, we all blame. I think that's more or less we have the tendency, but it doesn't have to be toxic first. If you empty the blaming from the toxic part, so that you realize that it wasn't their fault either, no, because it was passed on to your parents. And then I say to people, let's call it responsibility, meaning they were the cause, of course, but as I said to you, it wasn't their fault, and they couldn't even do their best to change simply because not only they didn't have the tools, but they weren't awake. So it was practically impossible. So it's a matter of responsibility, which means living or understanding that we all play roles in the life of others. We can have an impact in the life of other people. And that's it. Yeah. When you understand that it's a matter of responsibility, you can also begin to respond in a different way and break the chain. For example, instead of blaming, take responsibility, which means respond and break the chain. Do it for yourself and for the future generations.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's a realization, isn't it?
Yeah.
Huge, big realization. And for some people, the realization, in my experience, actually gets them to freeze. But when they settle, they get kind of comfortable with the realization of this has happened, that's happened. It's not my fault, it's not their fault, it just is. Eckhart Tolle talks about isness, things are it's just the way it is. And being comfortable with that, I think is a big thing. How do people get hold of you, Elena?
Sorry?
How do people get hold of you? How can people get in touch with you?
They can get in touch through LinkedIn, for example. I'm on Facebook too. They can visit my website, sentidu.com, and they can always email me.
Okay, I'm going to spell that for the listeners because not everybody is able to see your name on the screen. So that's Sentidu, Sentidu.com. What does that mean? Is that a nice Italian word?
Yeah, it's a Sardinian language actually, and it is the ability of the soul to see things for what they really are.
Ah, how magical!
Yeah,
magical. Sentidu, lovely. Every day, Sentidu. Every day is a school day, isn't it? We all learn every day.
Yes.
So your email is what? What is your email?
It's info@sentidu.com.
Marvelous. Okay, thank you. Is there anything that you'd like to say before we close to the listeners on maybe what they can do to help themselves if they feel that they're in the situation that where they're stuck?
Yeah, I would like to say that, especially now that we are in such a crisis globally, if you want to give yourself a chance to have a better life, to feel better with yourself and help your children have a constructive future, begin to reflect on yourself, observe your behavior. Don't feel scared to see things that you perhaps passed on to your children and start to create a bridge with them.
Building bridges, wonderful.
Yes.
I think there's an awful lot of bridge building to take place for a number of people, myself included. Thank you so much, Elena, for being with us today and for telling us a little bit about your story and how people can help themselves, which after all is what this podcast is about. Thank you.
Thank you.